Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove and it's time for the view from the opposition. This week it comes from Theo Squires, Liverpool writer down at the Liverpool Echo and part of the Blood Red podcast. Theo, thank you very much for joining us on the show. How are you keeping? Are you well?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for having us on. It's been quite a good season for Liverpool so far, so certainly all of us down here are enjoying it.
Yes, our listeners will know that I tipped Arne Slot to have a very bad start to his time at Liverpool, and I have to say I've got that very, very badly wrong. And he might make a little note of that and put even a better performance in against Newcastle tonight at St James's Park. It is a huge game for Newcastle as they look to kind of turn the tide on what has been a disappointing couple of results against West Ham and Crystal Palace, and they seem to be able to really get up for these games against the big sides, although Eddie Howe's record against Liverpool is absolutely shocking. Just one win in 17 attempts in his managerial career. Theo, from a Liverpool perspective, how are they going to approach this game? What are their thoughts about Newcastle and heading up to St James's Park this evening?
I think they're just treating it one game at a time. Like, it's been such a remarkable start from them under Arne Slot, winning 18 games from 20. They're obviously going to be full of confidence in a week where they've just beaten Real Madrid and Manchester City, the reigning champions of Europe and England. And he's very clever, Arne Slot, in terms of his opposition tactical awareness. So he looks at the strengths and the weaknesses, and he seems to pick his lineup according to that. So when they beat Bayer Leverkusen at the start of last month, it was quite a surprise, for example, to see Luis Diaz start up front. He'd picked a weakness in the Leverkusen backline, and that's how he organised that. And they've got a few injuries, Liverpool, but they seem to be navigating it really well at the moment. They're rotating where they can in certain positions, and it's all just coming along really nicely. Obviously, you've mentioned there, Newcastle are doing well against the bigger sides this season, isn't it? You beat him. Man City. No, you drew Man City, beat Chelsea, beat Tottenham, beat Arsenal. And then there is that, it's a bit one-sided, but that rivalry on Newcastle's side for Liverpool at the moment, a bit of aminosity there. It's been a while since Newcastle did Liverpool over, so those runs have got to come to an end at some point. It's something Arne Slot's actually said himself, but in terms of talking about Man City having to win at Anfield again one day, or Liverpool having to finally get one over on Real Madrid, and we've seen one of them come true. Obviously, well, they're flying high at the top of the Premier League table. Whatever the result, they're still going to be high at the top of the Premier League table. But you'd hope, for a Liverpool point of view, the momentum and the confidence keeps on going.
Did you expect such a good start for a Slot? You know, after replacing someone like Jurgen Klopp, he's doing brilliant, isn't he?
I don't think anyone expected it to be going as well as it is. Like, most of us would have taken top 4 finish, have a good go at one of the cups, basically match what happened in that final season under Jurgen Klopp. And it's just been amazing. Like, Liverpool last season, it looked like they were going to challenge for the title for a long while. Then they had all these injuries around the new year, but Klopp saying he was going to stand down probably carried them through a little longer than it would have done. But then when all the players came back, they weren't fully fit, and the ones that had played through, they were knackered. So it just sort of ran out of steam. But it was still a very good squad in place. It's a nice mix of the younger players that like revamped the midfield, for example, when you've got Curtis Jones, Szoboszlai, Gravenberch. But then you've also got the experience there that has won everything, done everything in Salah, Van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Alisson Becker. So it is a really nice squad in place for whoever was coming in, with players who have won everything, players who are just coming into their peak years, and they've all got that hunger to succeed. And I think they're probably flourishing from the fact that it is a new voice. Like we're seeing Man City this year, they're looking a little bit stale. But Arne Slot's taken what was working so well under Jurgen Klopp and tweaked it, with Liverpool being in a bit more control of matches. They're slowing it down and then raising it to that rock and roll style when they absolutely need to, pick in their moments. And it seems much more sustainable for a full league campaign. Obviously, we knew Arne Slot had won things in Holland. He's won the league, he's won the cup, he got to a European final. But it's still a big leap from Holland to England. And it just so happens that him coming into this Liverpool squad at the right time is matched with a Manchester City decline, Arsenal not quite being there, Chelsea still on the up, and he just seems to be taking advantage. A couple more injuries and maybe they'll have a blip. They're not going to win every single game until the end of the season. You can't imagine this is going to keep on all year long, but it's just been going amazingly so far, and he certainly found his feet at Liverpool now. Like, at first, the supporters felt a little bit forced when they were singing his name after Jurgen Klopp came up with his chant. But now that they're fully in, they see what he's doing, they understand what he's doing, and it's becoming a real blossoming relationship.
You mentioned there the week that Liverpool have had as well, and obviously they're going strong anyway, and they're full of confidence. But this is quite the week for Newcastle to face them, given who they've beaten in recent days.
Yeah, it is. I think there's been so many points this season where you look at the fixture list and Liverpool had a tough run, and you go, this will be the moment they slip up. After the October international break, they had Chelsea at home, RB Leipzig away, then Arsenal away. They got 2 wins and a draw out of those 3. And then you think, well, it'll be Real Madrid and Man City. They win both. And even now, off the back of them, Newcastle away, Everton in the Merseyside derby. Then you go into the festive period where it's just going to be a game every 3 days, except the injuries. But they've managed to rise to everything they've faced so far. Like, they seem to have learnt from that Nottingham Forest defeat back in September, I think it was. Like, that's taken the pressure off a little bit, because it's not Liverpool going unbeaten. How long can this start? They've had a defeat and they've seen how they respond to it. But it was still so long ago. It's like, what happens next? They got a really good draw against Arsenal in the circumstances. The Emirates isn't an easy place to go. And it was something that cost them last year, their records in those games against the sides at the top end of the table, and the away form especially. But we're yet to see how they react to the next blip, because they have just won everything for so long, pretty much. So it will be interesting to see what happens against Newcastle, because Newcastle seem to raise the game in these big games. And obviously, under lights, St James's Park, it's one of the few stadiums in England that can rival that Anfield European atmosphere sort of thing. And it's just the added narrative of Anthony Gordon, Joe Gomez, who's going to have to start because Ibrahima Konate is injured, and all these other nuances we get in Liverpool-Newcastle clashes these days. Going back to not Darwin Núñez, when Carvalho got the late winner and all that stuff on the sidelines, Núñez then getting the brace last year. It could be quite a fiery one.
Yeah, I'm expecting it to be quite feisty. And so far, you've not seen the inconsistencies. You've not seen, the results maybe drop. How difficult is it for Slot to make sure that there is no complacency when you do, without being disrespectful to Newcastle United, you do drop a level in many ways, because you faced Real Madrid, you faced Manchester City, 2 of the best clubs in the world, and Newcastle United are not at their level. And then, Liverpool come up with St James's Park. How does he ensure that the level of performance remains as it has done for the past 2 games?
Part of that will probably be rotation. Like, before Costas Tsimikas got injured, he was rotating pretty evenly between him and Andy Robertson since the Champions League got underway. In midfield, we're seeing Szoboszlai and Curtis Jones rotate pretty much every couple of games. McAllister as well sometimes. And in the front 3, it's the same with Darwin Núñez, Cody Gakpo and Luis Diaz. So all those players have constantly got to be on their toes. They've got to perform to keep their place in the side and get in the side. And even if they drop out, it's not they've been dropped, not been benched. It's just keeping them fresh. So I think that's helping Liverpool stay alert, because it is this squad management. We saw it the other way around last week, because they weren't at their best against Southampton, conceded a couple of sloppy goals after the international break, but then they dug in, got the result, and then they took it up a level against Madrid and Man City. But it's different looking at Liverpool's results than it is looking at them 90 minutes after 90 minutes after 90 minutes. Like, there's very few games where they have been completely at it, start to finish. It is more, we'll start quickly, get that early goal, then take the sting out of the game and pick our next moments, or start slowly, just keep control of the game, get to half-time. Arne Slot will pick out the weaknesses on position, and then they raise it after the break. It is a much more controlled way of playing, with that ability to find that next level. So I think the players have really bought into it, because Arne Slot is Dutch. He's very simple with what he says, and he's very clear with his instructions. So they know exactly what he wants from them, and he's won their trust very quickly. So if it gets to half-time and it's not quite going Liverpool's way, they can make these tweaks, they can make these changes, and looking at what's the opposition. And so far, it's worked really well. Obviously, there is going to be a point where you can't change it and it's going to come out on top. But so far, they're all buying into it. And there isn't that complacency, because they've learnt from last season. There is this hunger in the squad to win another Premier League, to win another Champions League. We hear Mo Salah say that on a weekly basis at the moment when he's talking about his contract situation. But then you've got the younger players who haven't been there before. Dominic Szoboszlai said so many times he spoke too much last year. He was eyeing up this silverware that didn't come, and now it's just doing the talking on the pitch.
Well, you mentioned there Mo Salah, who has performed really well this season, but there is that issue over his contract. And I think at most clubs that would become a massive distraction. Maybe the player's form would dip, and it would be all about his future and not the club and not the performances. But actually, he's been brilliant the last few weeks, hasn't he? So it's not a distraction at all. And I'm just wondering how has it not become a distraction? How have Liverpool just managed to kind of push on through?
I think it's almost become a running joke in the dressing room and the press conferences. Like when Mo Salah stopped in the Southampton mix zone, like you could see Virgil van Dijk when he came over for his own interview smirking away, because they know how rare it is for Mohamed Salah to speak to anyone in the mix zone really and stop. But because you've got Van Dijk is in the same situation and Trent Alexander-Arnold's in the same situation, these are big players who have won everything. They cannot let it be a distraction. Like, they know what they want to do. Van Dijk has come out publicly and said he wants to stay. Salah's come out publicly and said he wants to stay. And it's just about performing on the pitch, because the best chance of them getting what they want is winning more silverware for Liverpool, getting them further in the Champions League, so there's more finances to work with to earn them the contracts and all the bonuses that come along with it. It's a bit more challenging with Trent Alexander-Arnold because he's still so young, peak years ahead of him. It'd be understandable if he is tempted by Real Madrid, but it's still focusing on this season and what Liverpool can achieve this year. And with Man City and this mini decline, Arsenal not quite there. Like, they could go on a run now and properly put themselves back into title contention, be breathing down Liverpool's necks. But at the moment, you're looking over your shoulder if you're a Liverpool persuasion and going, where is everyone else? You realise this big opportunity now, and you don't want to let it slip, having lost out on the title by a point twice to Manchester City. And that's what these leaders in the camp are making sure. With Mo Salah, it is a point to prove. Like, he's wanting to show, I can still do it. I'm 32 years old. I'm going to be doing this when I'm 33, 34, 35. Like, you look at the Ballon d'Or winners for the last 10 years, they've all been that wrong side of 30. And he is the elite professional. He's in such superb condition. There was that point to prove after last year anyway, because he has the hamstring injury after AFCON, and you're going, oh, is this his body letting him down? Is this the start of decline? Take the contract out of completely, and he's still got to do that. Then it's prove himself to a new manager. So it's all just come together, and he's got that elite mentality. Like we saw in the past where he signed his last extension, 2-3 years ago. He wasn't at his best the second half of that season, and there was a suspicion, is this the contract coming through? Or is it because he's been away at AFCON and then he just came through and silenced that completely the following season? It's just what Mohamed Salah does. When you start to think this could be the start of the decline, he's not going to manage what he's been doing consistently for 7 or 8 years, he finds a way to raise it again. He believes his peak years are still ahead of him. And that shows how football is changing. When you look at a Ronaldo or a Messi that can do it, Salah is one of those elite athletes.
And is he the main man you think Eddie Howe will be trying to focus on tomorrow night and saying to his players, he's the one you've got to stop? Or is there just so much talent in that Liverpool starting 11, that Liverpool squad, that it's hard to pinpoint the main threat?
Salah is the obvious one. It's 13 goals, 11 assists from 20 games. That is completely ridiculous. Slot was asked in his press conference yesterday whether there's a worry about being over-reliant on Mohamed Salah. And it's like, we're not worried about those numbers dropping off. We're worried about him maybe getting injured and then someone having to step up and replace that. But they've still got Diaz, who has had an exceptional season so far, and Gakpo, who's had an exceptional season so far, both scoring a lot of goals, splitting that time on the left wing. And then while it's not quite happening in front of goal for Darwin Núñez the same way, he's still a threat. He's still got the pace. He's still got the power. He scares defenders. He's got such a good link up with Mohamed Salah that whoever they pick in that front three is dangerous. And then you go in the midfield. Szoboszlai probably had his best showing in a Liverpool shirt against Manchester City at the weekend, leading the press, winning everything back and just helping start the attacks. The week before, Curtis Jones had a great performance against Real Madrid. And Ryan Gravenberch has been absolutely immense as this holding midfielder for Liverpool, completely reinvented himself. I don't think anyone saw that coming at the start of the season. And he's been one of the players of the campaign. And then you go to the back four. Well, what can you say about Virgil van Dijk? He's just best defender of his generation. Keller has been incredible in goal, really stepped up in the absence of Alisson Becker. So it's a solid defensive base. But yeah, they've got so many offensive players that can cause damage. And if a couple of them don't start or it's not quite happening in that starting 11, you bring on, you can bring on a Gakpo or a Diaz or a Núñez. You can bring on Curtis Jones or Szoboszlai. There's still enough there to change a game in Liverpool's favour.
And in terms of how Liverpool will approach the game tonight, is it a case that they will want to have the ball and try and dominate possession? Is that how we're expecting them to play?
Yeah, I'd imagine so. It's what we've seen from them so far. changes whether they start quickly or just try and get a feel for the game first. It'll be interesting to see how they react, because it has been such a big week for them, and you have that Anfield atmosphere against both Madrid and City. But St James's Park is going to be a hell of an atmosphere as well. So it's that on the other foot, seeing how it is as an away side. Obviously, the away fans are so high up, but they've got a good recent record at St James's Park. Has it won the last 3 or something? So they've got the experience there of what they need to do. And it will just be interesting to see how they line up, how they go about it. They like to keep hold of the ball. They can take the sting out of the game and just pass it around slowly, and then pick their moments to, whether it's a Van Dijk or an Alexander-Arnold diagonal over the top, or a Szoboszlai McAllister through ball for one of the forwards to run onto. They've got such pace and trickery there that you can't switch off for a second, because they will find a way to punish you. And there is this calmness to them now as well. Like under Jurgen Klopp, it was chaotic. There was panic. It's pretty much, I think, the anniversary this week of them beating Fulham 4-3 when they were 3-2 down with 8 minutes to go or whatever. And there's the crowd atmosphere, but it's like, we'll force you into a mistake, and it's complete chaos. Whereas Liverpool now, it's breathe, relax. An opportunity will come. If you're relaxed, you will take that opportunity. It's just waiting for that moment to find the gap, get the pass through, score the goal.
It's funny though, because the preview that we did for the last game Newcastle played against Crystal Palace, I actually said I'm actually a little bit more confident of Newcastle managing to get a result against Liverpool than I am against Palace, because Palace were always just going to kind of try to sit deep and tell Newcastle United to unlock them, and Newcastle can't do that. Whereas against Liverpool, Newcastle United are going to have to sit deep and try and absorb some pressure and either press high, or if they manage to get the ball, can break on the counter. And I know, Liverpool are very good at unlocking and just being patient, so it's not going to be as simple as that. But there is, I think, slightly more confidence, as misplaced as it might be, Theo, that Newcastle might get a better result against Liverpool than they did against Palace, although we take a 1-1 draw, of course. But how will Liverpool handle that counter-attacking threat that Newcastle carry? Because that is when Newcastle United are at the best. When they have to be patient, they're not very good. We've seen that in recent weeks. But when they sit back and they have 1 or 2 moments to hit with speed, that's when Newcastle United can really hurt teams. Well,
this is something that Liverpool have been very good at this year, in terms of they've got Gravenberch there to protect the back four. Van Dijk's in top form. Konate, before he got injured, was in amazing form. And the fullbacks, while not at their best, they were still doing their job defensively. Like Trent Alexander-Arnold has stepped up when he's played, and he's won his challenges. He's coming along leaps and bounds under Arne slot defensively. Conor Bradley was excelling. There's a few question marks about Andy Robertson, but Tsimikas was playing well. And they were, as a unit, working really well together, whether it was Alisson in goal or Kelleher. Like the fact that you can have your number 2 goalkeeper in goal for, 2-3 months now, and no one's battering an eyelid today. It's just normal. Like, it is a very strong unit. And it's something that Arne Slot wanted implemented from the very first moment he came in. You run your socks off. You get back, you defend, you win this back. You make sure we don't concede, because it's the old cliche, isn't it? Like, the best way of getting that point is not conceding. And you go on and score your own goals. So we'll wait and see how they can cope with it, because Van Dijk is a machine. If someone's on the counter-attack, you expect him to get back and win it. Like, he's just so intimidating. But there is going to be a time when it's just too much for him to do. We saw that against Southampton, where they were a bit all over the place defensively. Southampton's second goal, I think it was just hitting them on the counter-attack. So there is a potential weakness there, but it's a risk in terms of how Liverpool play. And it's been a risk in how they play for a number of years now, going back to Jurgen Klopp's early formative years. It's just something they're used to. The slight danger at the moment is the defensive injuries. They've only got 5 defenders who are fit. And Slot said at the press conference yesterday, he doesn't expect Trent to be fit for the full 90 minutes. Like, he took him off after just over 70 against Man City. He says it's probably going to be similar against Newcastle and against Everton. And then you've only got Jarell Quansah in reserve. So you're either putting him out of position at right back, and he's up against Anthony Gordon there potentially, who we've seen cause Trent enough problems over the years, never mind somebody who's not natural there. Or you're reshuffling the defence to put Joe Gomez there, maybe a bit more defensively inclined, but it's still not ideal to have to reshuffle your defence in a game, especially when you're having to adjust to that quick, chaotic movement you can get from a counter-attack. But Liverpool have got the experience of dealing with it, and it's something that hasn't phased them much this season. And even if you get past the defence, the goalkeeper normally bails them out. It looks like it will be Kelleher for this one. I don't think Alisson's ready just yet, but he made a couple of magnificent saves against Real Madrid or other recent games. And then there's the one at the weekend when Van Dijk slips up, De Bruyne gets in, and he denies him one-on-one. He is in superb form at the moment. So as a unit, it's so hard to beat whether you've got everyone behind the ball or not.
I was going to ask you about that Southampton game, because that's the one that I look at and think Southampton managed to score 2 goals. So if Newcastle United can find the same vulnerabilities that Southampton managed to exploit, then there is hope. But are you saying what Southampton managed to exploit is pretty rare in terms of how the season's gone so far for Liverpool?
It has been for the majority, though. Away from home, there's maybe been a couple of more defensive mishaps. Like Brighton in the League Cup, they conceded a couple as well, and it was of their own doing. But obviously that was a changed backline, as you would rotate in the League Cup. Southampton's probably the first time we've seen it in the Premier League. But what was telling on that day was Virgil van Dijk and Ibrahima Konate were not at it. They made mistakes. It was the worst we'd seen them play this season. I think Van Dijk had come back from international duty with a bit of a knock anyway. But then against Real Madrid, against Man City, they're back to the best. And you get question marks again going, oh, Konate's injured. How are Liverpool going to react against Man City? Well, Gomez comes in and looks like he's been first choice all season. Never mind, hasn't been first choice at centre-back for 18 months nearly. They've just got very professional players. Well, if you can rattle them, there is always that chance you're going to create those chances. And we know what Van Dijk's like in terms of he can raise his game against a Real Madrid or a Man City, but occasionally, if he is going to drop, it is in these lesser games. It's probably why it happened against Southampton. But he's still elite defender, isn't he? It's very rare he has an off day. And even when he has an off day, he's still a match at any centre forward. Imagine if Isaac's fit, that's going to have a big say here, because it's a very different Newcastle if you've got that centre forward who always seems to score against Liverpool. It's caused them troubles in the past. We saw Van Dijk get sent off in this fixture last year because of that pace on the counter-attack and everything. But if Liverpool are on it, the defence are confident, playing well, it will be very hard to break them down.
Is there a weakness that Newcastle can exploit, or is it just down to individuals maybe having a momentary lapse in concentration?
Probably the fullbacks at the moment, and that seems harsh when you're saying it about Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson. They have struggled a little bit in terms of pace this season. So Trent, he's been great defensively. He's won lots of challenges, but when Doku came on at the weekend, he was getting past him a fair few times. And part of that is because Trent's just had a hamstring injury and he was getting a bit tired in his first game back. Before the hamstring injury, he'd had a side strain and he was having to have pain-killing injections for basically a month before the hamstring went. So he's been playing injured for a month and he's only now just got back. So that's still something you can target. Anthony Gordon's pace, that could cause him issues. And Andy Robertson, there's probably for a year now been question marks about, is this decline for him because he's been such an ever-present, his body's catching up on him, or is it because he's had a fair few injuries over the past year? Like most of them away on international duty, but he was playing through the pain barrier back end of last season, so be fit for the Euros. Then he got injured at the Euros, missed most of pre-season, so he's having to play catch-up as well. Bukayo Saka caused him big problems when Liverpool played Arsenal, so he got substituted early on. So it seems harsh to say these are the weaknesses there, but when you know they've got that vulnerability to the pace when back from injury or whatever, that's something that Newcastle could target. It just depends who you have on those wings. Anthony Gordon's obviously a massive threat. Harvey Barnes has always looked good when I've seen him, but if you have Harvey Barnes on the left, Gordon's not as good when he's on the right. So it's getting that right attacking trio. And then it's it. If you've got the striker who's fit, centre-back wise, should be pretty solid. Joe Gomez has looked great against Man City. It's whether he can carry on there. And then the big question mark on Liverpool is what happens if Ryan Gravenberch ever gets an injury, because they don't have anyone else like him. Wataru Endo's the next holding midfielder, and it's a completely different style. He's more been 5 minutes here and there to see out a game, but then it's a big gamble to rely on Liverpool's number 6 to pull up at some point in the match. So it's focus on those fullbacks, really, especially if they're bombing forward. But it's not the Liverpool of Jurgen Klopp where they're both out the other end of the pitch at all times. It's more Trent inverts and Robertson goes up, or Robertson stays back and Trent's going forward. It's a bit more controlled there to keep possession.
Well, that's going to be where I think everyone looks at the team sheet tonight from a Newcastle point of view and looks to see which flank Anthony Gordon is going to be on, because recent weeks it's been a bit of a change between him and Joe Linton on either flank. And I think what we will see anyway is they'll probably switch anyway as the game goes on, back and forth to either flank. But Anthony Gordon, as you say, much better on that left. But it's whether Eddie Howe maybe decides to deploy Joe Linton on that left to work alongside potentially Joe Willock and Lewis Hall and try and hit Trent with maybe a bit of physicality as well as the speed as well. But one to watch out for most certainly. Just a reminder, guys, that this podcast is brought to you by NORD VPN. Do hit that link in the description box to get a very discounted offer on your NORD VPN plan. Help protect yourself, especially when you're out using public Wi-Fi. Defy the scammers and hackers from getting your personal details and stay safe. It is well worth your monthly subscription. I was going to ask you about the player that you think Liverpool will most be fearing. I guess, Theo, with what you've just discussed there about the full-backs, is it Anthony Gordon if he plays on the left, or is it an Alexander Isak? Who are you picking out?
It's probably both of them. If Isak's fit, it's going to be him because he always seems to score against Liverpool. It's just one of those annoying players. I remember Van Dijk did an interview a couple of years ago, and he said Olivier Giroud had that knack of always scoring against him. Obviously, he's left the Premier League now, but Isak seems to be that next one stepping into that mantle because he's got a bit of everything, doesn't he, as a centre forward? But he's also got the injury record as well. And I know he came off at the weekend. So it's how he is. But then Gordon's probably got a point to prove as well. Like, boyhood Liverpool fan, we know how close he was to joining the club in the summer. Liverpool and Newcastle only know why exactly they pulled the plug on that or what would have happened if it had gone through. Because Luis Diaz and Cody Gakpo have been so good on that left flank. Would they have had to sacrifice one of them to bring Gordon in? Or would they have tried to make Gordon a right winger, but then Salah's there? So not quite sure how it would fit in at Liverpool. But that's still a point for him to prove against Liverpool why this transfer didn't go through, why they wanted him in the first place. We've seen him score against them before and enjoy it quite a lot. He's obviously a very popular player at Newcastle, so we'll have to prove his loyalties a little bit as well. It's going to be those two, isn't it? The pace and the fact that whenever Newcastle are at their best, those two are right in the thick of it, scoring the goals, getting the assists. It's quite an easy cop-out of an answer, isn't it, saying your two-star players? But it is the two-star players because they've done it against Liverpool before.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone would pick those two players because they are Newcastle's biggest threat. What remains to be done then, Theo, is to get your score prediction. How is it going to go tonight?
I think I said on Blood Red it would be 2-0 Liverpool. But yeah, I suppose I should be a bit more kind to Newcastle, seeing as they're on the everything is black and white. So I'll go 2-1 Liverpool. I'll let you have a goal.
I did predict 2-1 to Liverpool in our match preview. I think Newcastle will give a really good showing of themselves, which they need to do after a terrible performance away at Crystal Palace and a disappointing second half against West Ham back on Monday. I think we will see an improved performance. I think, as usual, though, we will see Liverpool manage to beat Newcastle, not by a thumping, though, but 2-1, I think will be the score. Fingers crossed I am wrong and Newcastle can upset the odds, but I think Liverpool are just doing so well and Newcastle aren't in a great run of form that there's only one winner, really, unfortunately. But you never know. They've always got a chance. But thank you to Theo for popping onto the podcast and providing the insight into Liverpool. Make sure you guys head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the build-up to tonight's game. Give the podcast a like, give it a share. And for myself, I will see you guys later in the week.